Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Disposition of Property webinar. We respectfully honor and acknowledge that we are meeting in the unceded territory of the Secwepemc Nation and specifically the territory of the Kamloops to Secwepemc people. Tonight, we have three speakers and panelists, and we'll each introduce ourselves.
Art McDonald, Director of Facilities.
Chelsea Eisner, Director of Communications and Board Administration.
And I'm Rhonda Nixon, Superintendent of Schools. So the purpose of getting together this evening is that part of the disposition of real property process is to conduct public consultation for the Board of Education. And it's to obtain the community's feedback on the proposed disposal of lands and buildings. Our goal is to listen to your feedback and questions, to offer answers to questions in this session or following the session in the FAQs on the district website. The outcome is to enable broad public consultation, a requirement of the Disposal of Land or Improvements Order and the Ministry of Education and Childcare Capital Branch's real property disposal requirements. We have a Board of Education comprised of 9 elected school trustees, and as per Board Policy 2, Role of the Board, Section 9.10, the Board shall approve the acquisition and the disposition of district land and buildings. Tonight, the terms of reference for our community engagement recommendations. It's to share feedback from consultation with the Kamloops Thompson Board of Education about the community's feedback regarding the preferred uses of the 3 parcels of land and whether the community supports the sale of the land. Second, it's to participate in the feedback process and share any insights or questions that will support the board and the ministry to review the potential uses of the parcels of land by following the requirements of the Disposal of Land or Improvements Order. In this meeting tonight, our meeting norms are to agree to remain respectful at all times. Participate positively in the conversation. Listen and hear all viewpoints with an open mind and honor individuals' rights to dignity and to privacy. On the public spectrum of community engagement, you will be informed tonight, so we will provide you with information. Also, in a sense, you are consulting because by your questions and answers and sharing your insights, we will be able to provide feedback and gain feedback. By the end of all the consultation mechanisms, so we've had a survey, we have people emailing, we've had personal phone calls, we've had discussions informally and through this more formal process and then a survey to follow. You have been involved in a sense in directing us through this process as to your concerns or your insights about how to use this land. Who will engage? Parents, staff, and community members. This has been on social media. Anyone was able to RSVP. So that includes parents and staff in our community, but anyone beyond as well. We've engaged through survey, emails, letters, calls, and a webinar. And when will a decision be made? Ministry consultation processes follow this process. So the ministry informs the board of the decision to support the sale of the land or not. And if they do support us to follow the sale of land, we then take this back to the Board of Education and we follow the checklist, which has been provided to us by the ministry. How will the community learn about the results? On our district website, through social media, public boards, and board notes. I would also say that there's several informal mechanisms like the superintendent's update and other things that we'd post online and say to the media.
So the first parcel we're going to look at is what we're calling the Parkrest Park. And on this map, you can see we've provided some touchstones so you can see where it is. Brocklehurst Arena on the left side of the screen, Parkrest Elementary in the upper middle, and Brocklehurst Secondary on the right bottom corner of the side. So Parkrest Park is basically at the corner of Parkrest and Shriner. And just a higher resolution image showing where it is at the corner of Parkrest and Shriner. It's within the Brocklehurst community and surrounded by a developed residential neighborhood. It's approximately 1.82 acres. And the board purchased this property from a private citizen in 1954. And the rationale for the sale is this property is considered too small for a school site and is not required for educational purposes. The second parcel is what we're calling Sahali Park. Currently, it is not a park. It is undeveloped land. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, that's where Sahali Secondary is. Summit Drive is off to the left, and Arrowstone Drive is on the upper portion of the picture. And again, some of the details, it's located at 435 Arrowstone, adjacent to the high school. It's a 1.29 acre parcel. The board acquired this property in 1991, and again, the rationale is it's considered too small for a school site and not required for educational purposes. And the third parcel up for consideration is what we're calling our Little Fort property. It's an old one-room schoolhouse in the community of Little Fort. You can see it up in the upper left corner of the drawing, and we've shown the Little Fort Community Hall just for reference. It's about 2 kilometers off of Highway 5A, or Highway 5, sorry, in Little Fort. Again, I've given you the location. It's just over 1.2 acres. The board was transferred this property in 1915 by a private citizen, and the school was closed by board motion in March 1998 due to limited student enrollment in the community. And similar to the other 2 parcels, it has no further use for educational purposes.
The summary of the feedback so far, which was conducted September 30th to October 11th, we had 28 responses. 13 responses confirmed that the board should sell the properties. 4 responses indicated the value of the space as parkland and to work with the city to dispose of the land to maintain this use. 10 responses were no. 2 did not have explanation. 1 wants it reserved for extracurricular, 4 for a daycare, 1 for a camp for children, 1 unless we collaborate, no unless we collaborate with the city of Kamloops to the parkland, and 1 to work with the city to find buyers. There was 1 comment that did not respond to the question asked.
At this time, we'll invite your questions and comments. If you go to your Zoom toolbar and click on the Q&A section, you can add a question in there. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can, and those we don't address, we will post as FAQs on the website following the webinar. So if you'd like to ask a question, please add it to the Q&A now.
Yes, thank you. So the first question is, do all 3 parcels of land have to be sold to satisfy the debt of the school district? And the response is that the sale of land is for rejuvenation of capital assets, and the debt that or the deficit is in the operating fund. So the 2 at this time are not related. Thank you. The question is, were educational uses and purposes the only things considered? I would say at this time, that's my knowledge, and I will ask Director McDonald because he has expertise in the area of other purposes or considerations, and just ask him to further elaborate.
Yeah, at this point, we're looking at educational uses because we are a school district, and that is our mandate. We are not land developers or any of those things. So we feel it's best to pass that on to somebody who has the expertise in those areas. So our next question is, how would the street access to Arrowstone be provided or anticipated? Curious, thank you so much. That is one of the reasons we are looking to dispose of this property, is it is somewhat landlocked, and access would need to be provided by one of the adjacent properties. Thank you.
The next question is, what is the timeline that these parcels of land would become available to purchase by the public? And the answer to the question is a little bit dependent on the ministry. So we will conclude our consultation, should it be the will of the board, at approximately the end of November. So essentially, we stop November 12th. We share with the board on November 18th what we have as consultation evidence. The board may choose to extend the consultation. If the board chooses to do that, then we would proceed and notify the community. If the board feels that, it's satisfied what they believe to be broad consultation, and we also are working closely with the ministry to assume that we meet that threshold, then it would go to the ministry. The ministry takes 90 to 120 days. And what they do is they actually provide the same descriptions and opportunities for any ministry to look at purposes that they consider to be important to the community, and they can actually approach the Ministry of Education and Childcare through us to access the land. Now, at that point, you would say, well, what's the date? There isn't a date, but we're talking about probably looking at February, March at the earliest, where we would look at informing the public if we are able to sell the land. And the board would do that by board motion, and we would make that very clear through social media and all the channels of communication we have available.
Should the board decide to sell these properties, what does that process look like? Typically, what we would do is we would put out an RFP to the public, indicating the minimum value that would be acceptable based on the appraised values. And then we would accept responses to that RFP process.
What will the money be used for if the properties sell? That's an excellent question. So the money, I will start the answer, and then I know Director McDonald will have many examples otherwise. The money would go into capital assets. And so that is a location where it can be used towards projects. It can be used towards large capital projects. For example, if the school is awarded to the school district, and the board also has the opportunity to use it for local capital expenses. And I'll get Director McDonald to further elaborate. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. At this point too, we also need to indicate that we don't know what money will be available for what purpose initially, mainly because the ministry has the ability to restrict the money and how we use it, and we would not know that until the completion of the process. Thank you. So our next question is, what role could the parcel adjacent to Sahali Secondary play in advance of a new school being built in Aberdeen? We do not want 5-block rotations for our high school students. One of the reasons we are looking at disposing of this property is we don't see any value to Sahali Secondary. There's quite a large elevation difference between this parcel and Sahali Secondary. So to make any kind of connection and to comply with things like accessibility rules, we would use a lot of that property up just to create slopes that are appropriate for people with special needs.
All right, the next one is, what role does the district play in childcare through the Ministry of Education and Childcare? And the second question is, should the parcels be considered for an after-school care or preschool? So the role the district plays in childcare is to be able to apply to the Ministry of Education and Childcare for capital funding and support to be able to build childcare. And of course, we have childcare at Ralph Bell as an example. And so we tend to build our childcare facilities on school grounds. We have never at this time contemplated advising the board to build school or childcares off school grounds. And I will actually, we anticipated this question, and I will turn over the remainder of the comment to Director McDonald.
Just in addition to what Dr. Nixon said, we have found some good synergies between the daycares and having them on our school properties due to the ability to access play fields and sufficient parking and those things. Thank you. Our next question, does Arrowstone property have an access from the main road? And I did touch on that earlier. It does not currently.
The next question is, why are these parcels of land being considered for sale at this time? In particular, the Parkrest Park, which is used by the community frequently as a green space for soccer, other sports, and gathering. The sale of property is reviewed, or the potential sale of property is reviewed annually by the board through Director McDonald, and the department provides just recommendations based on numerous factors. One of them is collaboration with our partners. The other is to do with the economy, and the other is to do with whether or not we can see an educational purpose for land, because of course we always want to expand and use the land we have available for educational purposes. And at this time, I believe those 3 parcels of land were chosen because there are no educational purposes. For example, we can't extend a school or build a school on the land, and that is our core mandate. So I believe that it was timely to be able to recommend to the board to look at those parcels. And it's not that they haven't been looked at in the past. The board has annually always looked at all parcels of land, had in-depth discussions, and yeah, it was timely to look at them now, given the economy and what we're able to do consultation and recommendations for the board.
Our next question is, will any party have the opportunity to submit an offer to purchase the land should they be approved for sale? So as I mentioned, there will be a public RFP process. So as long as potential bidders meet the criteria outlined in the RFP, they would be able to submit an offer.
And the next one is a comment and a question. So I wish that the Parkrest property could be sold to the city for continued use as green space and a field for teams. Is this a consideration? And I can say absolutely, one of our biggest partners is the city of Kamloops, and we would fully expect that if the city council wished to take an interest in the purchase, they would enter the same process as all potential purchasers of the land. And your suggestion about park space makes sense. And I think that we've had that in our feedback so far. Thank you.
Our next question, is there an opportunity to provide additional inclusive education opportunities for at-risk students with some examples to meet the needs of students not attending full-time in other schools? Any new building we would build would have to be funded by the Ministry of Education. And that would have to go onto our capital plan and be prioritized with our other school priorities.
So the question is, can Arrowstone property be developed as a community center in conjunction with the school, city, and nonprofit organizations? The answer to the question is that through consultation, if that's a recommendation, we take that as an opportunity to bring back to the board. But we also would say that we're interested in furthering the board's ability to potentially sell the land. And of course, we work with partners all the time. And if we're going to work with partners who are interested in working with us, which would be natural to do so, we would then do that. So whatever the use might be, whatever the use that it's purchased for, we're often going to be a partner, for example, with the city.
Our next question on the Arrowstone parcel, will the sale include an access easement off the school property? Is that possibility being considered? And the answer to that would be no, there won't be an easement off the school property. The reason being our access off of Arrowstone is quite constrained already, and we wouldn't be able to give up that amount of width in our drive aisle.
Could modulars be placed on the parcel adjacent to Sahali Secondary? The answer is yes, modulars could be placed on the parcel adjacent to Sahali Secondary if we had modulars to do that and it was a desired use. At this time, it was not a use that we've contemplated, but it would be considered a capital project if we wanted to put that forward to the ministry. We certainly could, and that's why we're engaging in consultation, because we can certainly bring back these ideas and then look at the positives and negatives of the potential of doing that and putting it on the capital plan versus selling the land and working in partnership with a third party. Thank you. The question is, so the sale of the land has nothing to do with the $2 million, to do with the $2 million the school district needs to make up this year because of an accounting error. The accounting error affected the operating fund and caused a deficit in the operating fund. The sale of the land, 3 parcels of land, as you can see, is quite a lengthy process. In fact, it takes a number of months of consultation locally. It takes 90 to 120 extra days on top of that from the ministry. Then at that point, the ministry may choose to restrict some funds for capital projects that are future. There's a lot of legislation guiding the disposal of land. So it is not something that is connected to the deficit because it is not money that can be counted upon. It's not money that goes into operating. It's money that goes into capital and can be restricted by the ministry for future projects and so forth. So the answer is no, that is not the reason for selling the land.
At this time, we have addressed the questions in the Q&A and there are no outstanding questions. So if people have further questions, we ask that they add them to the Q&A now in the next minute or two, and we will do our best to answer the last few questions.
And we have another question. How about student housing in partnership with TRU on Arrowstone Drive property and long-term economic sustainability too? The answer to that question is that wasn't considered. We haven't been working with TRU on housing. It isn't the core mandate of the school district to work on housing. It would be for educational purposes under the School Act. So that isn't something that we've contemplated or would have recommended to the board because of that reason. But thank you for the suggestion, because that's exactly why we're engaged in consultation. Thank you. Thank you. We have just another comment. Can you please add my name to the list of community members that would like Parkrest to remain a green space for our neighborhood? We absolutely can and will, and we have documented every comment, question that has come in either through survey, through email, or through this process. We have somebody taking a script. So thank you.
So our next question, my dealings with other school districts around the province has heard from 2 districts that sold land and now regrets it. Did you ask other districts their experience in this? No, we haven't. And again, due to the size of these parcels, they're not big enough to house a proper school, field, parking lot, etc. So we have not consulted with other districts. Thank you. Our next question, how long until the expected secondary school in Aberdeen is built? I cannot give an answer to that question at this time. The new high school in Aberdeen is our #1 priority on our capital plan. And we're at the discretion of the ministry to decide when they're going to fund that project.
The next question is there more than one if there is more than one party interested in a property, say Parkrest Park, will the deciding factor go to the highest bidder? It is often true that it goes to the highest bidder, but there are also other criteria that are agreed upon by the board before we put forward an RFP. In that process, we gain insights from the ministry as well as our capital branch department for criteria that they suggest in addition to our own staff. And then the board has to agree to that criteria. So certainly being the highest bidder is likely one of the criteria that would be important. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. If anyone has further questions or comments after this webinar, we are still accepting feedback until November 12th. So this slide is just directing you to where you can submit your feedback after this webinar. If you go to our website, sd73.bc.ca, along the top menu, if you select our district/board and then click on Board of Education, you'll be taken to a page with the board's capital priorities. From there, you'll need to click on the purple circle that says Consultation Disposal of Real Property, and that will take you to a page with a survey and more information about how to submit feedback. So this is what that page will look like. And you can see here that there is a link to the survey and it is open until November 12th. And we invite you to submit any further feedback through that survey.
Sorry to interrupt, but there is one more question and Director McDonald would like to take this one. Thank you.
So we have one last question. Is it possible then that the community interest can supersede it being sold to a developer for housing? And that is why we're conducting this process, and this consultation is to get feedback from the community. And all that information will be presented to the board. And if we get to the point where these properties up for sale, all that feedback will inform the board and the RFP.
Okay, thank you again. So on this same page on our website where you can get the survey link, you will also see closer to the bottom of the page. If you have questions or feedback, please email feedback. So if you click on that link, you can also send us an email with your feedback or comments. So after this webinar, just to remind you, you can still fill out the survey until November 12th, and you can submit your feedback via email. And all the questions and comments and feedback will be compiled and presented to the board.
The timeline for communication, as you will see, we began the process on September 23rd, informing the board of the possibility of presenting a plan for the disposal of 3 properties. Letters outlining the board's intent to dispose of 3 parcels of land were sent to multiple partners. From September 30th to October 11th, a website release news article and discussions about the board's intent to dispose of real property with a link to a fillable form, as you have seen, to collect feedback from the broader community was sent out through social media, digital media, as well as websites. The District of Clearwater, Raft River, Ravenby, Blue River, Barrier, and the online form was open for a 2-week period. And then to inform the board, to inform the broader public of the board's intent to sell these properties was the primary reason that was done. And then beyond that, social media posts, as described earlier, were a big part of this, and we did have phone calls also to follow up with some of the letters and the comments made through Facebook and social media. And then September 30th to October 11th, there were local news outlets that published stories, and also we did. October 11th to 12th, there were personalized calls made to follow up, and a conversation with the DPAC chair, who requested an extension of the feedback timeline, which was appreciated. And then October 21st at the regular public board meeting, the board approved extending the feedback period until November 12th. And then, of course, you've taken part now in a webinar where you're able to ask questions and offer suggestions. And we will continue posting the FAQs as we get them. And we do get them through various means, webinar, sometimes social media, and also through the feedback survey that you see online. And then on November 18th, we will compile all of the feedback and take it to the board and show the board what has been requested and thought about. We will have engaged in consultation with the ministry at that time as well, prior to submitting it to ministry consultation, should that be the board's wish. Usually at that point, it goes, as I said, between 90 and 120 days. And then following that period, should it be the wish of the ministry, the board, we would then put out a request for proposals. Thank you so much for participating. We will be posting this webinar, recorded webinar, so that if you have any colleagues or family friends or friends who would like to see the webinar, it will be available, and that might inform their their posting of feedback as well on the website. We will post the FAQs. Have a very good evening. Thank you.